When my boss forced me to work Christmas Day to save our biggest client account, then presented my solution to the board as his own brilliant strategy, he thought he had won. What he didn't know was that I had been documenting everything for 2 years, and when Meridian Industries called the board asking specifically for me by name, his carefully constructed lie was about to unravel in the most spectacular way possible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The emergency notification arrived on my phone at 6:47 a.m. on December 23rd, interrupting the quiet morning I had planned to spend preparing Christmas dinner for my family. The message was marked urgent and came directly from my direct supervisor, Richard Blackstone, Director of Strategic Client Relations at Sterling & Associates, one of the premier management consulting firms in Chicago. Critical client situation. With Meridian Industries. Need immediate intervention. Report to office by 9 a.m. This is not optional. My name is Jessica Martinez, and at 34 years old, I had spent the last 7 years building a reputation as one of Sterling & Associates' most effective senior consultants. My specialty was operational crisis management, helping large corporations navigate complex challenges that threaten their competitive position or market stability. Over 7 years, I had successfully managed 43 major client engagements, with a track record that included saving clients over $60 million in operational improvements and strategic repositioning. The Meridian Industries account represented the largest engagement in Sterling & Associates' current portfolio. Meridian was a Fortune 500 manufacturing company with operations across North America, generating annual revenues exceeding $2 billion. Their contract with our firm was worth $1.2 million annually, making it essential to our company's financial performance and strategic growth objectives. I had been the lead consultant on the Meridian account for 18 months, working closely with their executive team to implement supply chain optimizations and operational efficiency improvements. The relationship had been built through consistent delivery of results, deep understanding of their industry challenges, and the personal trust that develops when professionals consistently exceed expectations under demanding circumstances. Driving to the office on that cold December morning, I reflected on the pattern that had characterized my relationship with Richard Blackstone over the past 2 years. Richard had been promoted to director 6 months after I began working on the Meridian account, despite having significantly less consulting experience and a client track record that was adequate but not exceptional. His promotion had been based primarily on his MBA from Northwestern and his ability to present well in executive meetings, rather than his demonstrated success in managing complex client relationships. Since his promotion, Richard had consistently taken credit for the strategic insights and implementation successes that I had developed through direct client engagement and detailed analysis. He would attend client presentations where I presented my recommendations, then follow up with separate meetings where he would position those same insights as his own strategic thinking. This pattern had become so predictable that I had begun documenting our interactions and maintaining detailed records of my work product development. The Sterling & Associates office building was nearly empty when I arrived, with only security personnel and a few dedicated staff members present during what should have been the final weekend before Christmas. Richard was waiting in the main conference room, surrounded by printed reports, laptop computers, and the kind of scattered paperwork that suggested he had been working since very early morning. "Jessica, thank you for coming in," he said, his tone carrying the urgency that marked genuine crisis situations. "We have a serious problem with Meridian Industries that requires immediate attention. Their board of directors is meeting on December 26th to make critical decisions about their manufacturing restructuring project, and they need our strategic recommendations before that meeting." I sat down across from him, noting the stress indicators that suggested this was indeed a significant emergency rather than manufactured urgency designed to create unnecessary pressure. "What specifically is happening with Meridian?" Richard consulted his notes before responding. Their primary competitor, Titan Manufacturing, announced a major acquisition yesterday that will significantly impact market dynamics in their core business segments. Meridian's board is concerned about their competitive position and wants immediate analysis of strategic response options. They need comprehensive recommendations that address both defensive positioning and potential offensive strategies. The situation was indeed serious. Titan Manufacturing was Meridian's largest direct competitor, and a major acquisition could shift competitive dynamics in ways that would require immediate strategic response. The timing was particularly challenging because most corporate executives and consultants would be unavailable during the Christmas holiday period, limiting Meridian's options for obtaining external strategic guidance. What is our timeline for delivering recommendations? I asked, though I suspected the answer would confirm my growing concern about holiday obligations. The analysis needs to be completed and presented to their board by December 26, Richard replied. That means we need to have comprehensive, strategic recommendations ready by Christmas evening to allow for review and final preparation before the board presentation. The timeline meant working through Christmas Day, abandoning the family celebrations that I had been planning for weeks and that my extended family had organized around my schedule. My parents had traveled from Phoenix to spend the holiday with me, and my sister had coordinated her vacation time to ensure our first complete family Christmas together in 3 years. Richard, I understand the urgency, but working on Christmas Day will require canceling family commitments that have been planned for months. Is there any possibility of adjusting the timeline or bringing in additional resources to share the workload? His response was immediate and non-negotiable. Jessica, this is our most important client relationship, and their request is not something we can decline or delegate. I need you to handle this personally because of your deep knowledge of their operations and your established relationship with their executive team. I understand the personal sacrifice, but this is the kind of situation that defines career advancement opportunities. The phrase about career advancement opportunities was particularly ironic given Richard's consistent pattern of taking credit for my work while positioning himself as the strategic leader of our client relationships. But the Meridian situation was genuinely urgent, and I recognized that my expertise was indeed necessary for developing the comprehensive analysis they required within the compressed timeline. I will handle the analysis and recommendations, I said, resigned to the necessity of canceling Christmas plans that had been months in the making. But I want to ensure that my contribution to this work is properly documented and recognized, given the personal sacrifice required and the critical nature of the deliverable. Richard nodded quickly, his expression suggesting relief that I had agreed to take on the assignment without further resistance. Absolutely, Jessica. Your work on this will be fully recognized, and I will ensure that Meridian understands the exceptional effort you have invested in supporting their strategic needs during the holiday period. The next 48 hours represented some of the most intensive analytical work I had undertaken during my consulting career. Working from my home office to maintain some connection with family while they celebrated Christmas without me, I conducted comprehensive competitive analysis of Titan Manufacturing's acquisition, assessed potential impact scenarios on Meridian's market position, and developed strategic response options that addressed both immediate defensive needs and longer-term competitive positioning. The analysis required reviewing hundreds of pages of financial reports, industry analysis, and market research to understand the full implications of Titan's acquisition strategy. I interviewed former colleagues who had worked with Titan to gain insights into their operational capabilities and strategic approach. I developed financial models that projected various competitive scenarios and evaluated the resource requirements for different strategic response options. Most critically, I leveraged my deep understanding of Meridian's internal capabilities, organizational culture, and strategic priorities to ensure that my recommendations were not just theoretically sound but practically implementable within their specific operational context. This industry knowledge and client relationship depth could not have been replicated by other consultants who lacked my 18 months of direct engagement with Meridian's leadership team. By Christmas evening, I had completed a comprehensive strategic analysis that included 67 pages of detailed recommendations, supporting financial models, implementation timelines, and risk assessment frameworks. The document represented the most thorough competitive response analysis I had ever produced, incorporating insights that would typically require weeks of research and analysis to develop properly. Richard reviewed my work on December 26 morning, expressing genuine appreciation for the quality and comprehensiveness of the analysis. Jessica, this is exceptional work. The strategic insights are exactly what Meridian needs, and the implementation framework provides them with clear action steps for responding to Titan's acquisition. This will definitely strengthen our relationship with their executive team. The Meridian board presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. on December 26, and Richard would be delivering the strategic recommendations to their executive leadership team. I had prepared detailed presentation materials that explained the analytical methodology, key findings, and strategic recommendations in formats that would be accessible to board members with varying levels of industry expertise. Will I be participating in the board presentation? I asked, hoping to have direct interaction with the client leadership team that would recognize my role in developing the strategic analysis. I will be handling the board presentation personally, Richard replied. Your analysis provides the foundation, but I need to position the recommendations within the broader strategic context of our ongoing relationship with Meridian. Board presentations require a certain level of senior relationship management that aligns with my role as director. His response was disappointing but not surprising given his consistent pattern of taking primary credit for client-facing activities while relegating my role to background analytical support. However, I had been documenting these interactions carefully, and I was confident that my contributions would be recognized appropriately when the opportunity arose. The board presentation proceeded as scheduled, and Richard called me that evening to report that Meridian's leadership team had been extremely impressed with the strategic analysis and had accepted our recommendations for their competitive response strategy. The client had agreed to an additional engagement worth $400,000 to support implementation of the recommended strategic initiatives. Jessica, the client, was particularly impressed with the depth of industry knowledge and the practical implementation framework, Richard said, his tone suggesting genuine appreciation for the work quality. This success will definitely be recognized in your performance review and will strengthen your position for future leadership opportunities. What I did not learn until several weeks later was how Richard had presented my work to Meridian's board of directors. According to the detailed presentation materials that I eventually obtained through client relationship management files, Richard had positioned himself as the primary strategic architect of the competitive analysis and recommendations. My role had been characterized as providing analytical support and research assistance for his strategic insights and relationship management. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The presentation materials included phrases such as, "under my strategic direction," and, "based on my analysis of competitive dynamics," that positioned Richard as the intellectual author of work that I had developed independently through my own research, analysis, and strategic thinking. Most concerning, the client relationship documentation suggested that Meridian's leadership team believed Richard had personally worked through the Christmas holiday to develop their strategic recommendations. This misrepresentation of my contributions would have remained undetected except for an unexpected development that occurred 3 weeks after the board presentation. Meridian Industries was acquired by a private equity firm that was conducting comprehensive due diligence on all external consulting relationships as part of their operational assessment process. The due diligence process included detailed interviews with Meridian executives about their consulting engagements, the specific value delivered by external advisors, and their preferences for continued relationships during the ownership transition. These interviews were conducted by representatives from the private equity firm who were focused on understanding the actual working relationships rather than the formal organizational charts that typically guided client relationship management. During these interviews, Meridian's Chief Operating Officer, Patricia Williams, made specific references to her working relationship with me and her appreciation for the strategic insights I had provided during their competitive response planning. She mentioned several conversations we had conducted during the analysis period and specifically credited my understanding of their operational challenges as being critical to developing implementable strategic recommendations. More significantly, Patricia Williams expressed to the private equity representatives that she hoped their transition would not disrupt Meridian's working relationship with me specifically, as she considered my expertise to be uniquely valuable for their ongoing strategic challenges. She had not mentioned Richard Blackstone at all during these discussions, despite his role as the official relationship director and the person who had delivered the board presentation. The private equity firm's representative contacted Sterling and Associates to discuss continuing the consulting relationship during Meridian's ownership transition. However, instead of requesting continuation of the existing arrangement, they specifically asked whether I would be available to lead their consulting engagement directly, without the current management structure that they perceived as creating unnecessary layers between their operational needs and the consulting expertise they valued. This request reached Sterling and Associates senior management on January 15, creating an unexpected situation that required immediate attention from our executive team. The private equity firm controlled Meridian's consulting budget and decision-making authority, making their preferences critically important for maintaining this key client relationship. The request also revealed a significant discrepancy between Richard's representation of the client relationship dynamics and the actual working relationships that had developed through direct professional interaction. Senior management began asking questions about the specific nature of my role in the Meridian engagement and the basis for the client's preference for working with me directly rather than through the existing management structure. These questions led to a review of project documentation, client interaction records, and work product development that revealed the pattern of misrepresentation that had characterized Richard's management of my contributions over the previous 18 months. The review process uncovered multiple instances where my strategic insights and analytical work had been presented to clients as Richard's intellectual property and relationship management achievements. Most critically, the review revealed that my Christmas work had been presented to Meridian's board as Richard's personal sacrifice and strategic contribution, despite the fact that he had spent Christmas Day with his family while I had worked through the holiday to develop the analysis that had saved their largest client relationship. The discovery of this misrepresentation pattern created a crisis within Sterling and Associates' senior management team, as they realized that their most valuable client relationship was based on expertise and working relationships that they had been systematically misattributing to the wrong team member. The private equity firm's request for direct engagement with me had inadvertently revealed that their client relationship management structure was undermining rather than supporting their most important consulting relationships. Senior management scheduled an emergency meeting for January 18 to address the client relationship management issues that had been revealed through the Meridian ownership transition. The meeting would include the managing partners, senior directors, and the consulting team members directly involved in the Meridian engagement. As I prepared for this meeting, I reflected on the 2 years of documentation that I had maintained regarding my work contributions and the misrepresentation patterns that had characterized Richard's management approach. I had been careful to document client interactions, work product development, and strategic insights in detailed files that could demonstrate my actual role in developing the consulting relationships and deliverables that had driven our success with major clients. The documentation included email communications with clients, drafts of strategic analyses showing development progression, and detailed records of client feedback that specifically referenced my contributions to their strategic planning processes. This evidence would be essential for demonstrating the actual working relationships that had developed through direct professional engagement rather than the organizational hierarchy that Richard had used to claim credit for my work. The January 18th meeting would represent a critical moment for my career development and professional recognition within Sterling and Associates. The private equity firm's request had created an opportunity to establish appropriate recognition for my contributions while ensuring that client relationships were managed in ways that maximized value for both the clients and the consulting firm. More importantly, the situation would test whether Sterling and Associates senior management was committed to recognizing and supporting the professionals who actually developed client relationships and delivered strategic value, or whether they would prioritize maintaining existing hierarchical structures even when those structures were undermining client satisfaction and business development. The next phase of this story would reveal whether 2 years of careful documentation and consistent professional excellence would be sufficient to overcome the political dynamics that had allowed systematic misrepresentation of my contributions to continue for 18 months without detection or correction. The irony was that Richard's attempt to take credit for my Christmas sacrifice had inadvertently created the circumstances that would expose his entire pattern of misrepresentation to senior management review. Sometimes the best preparation for unexpected opportunities is the preparation you hope you will never need to use. The emergency senior management meeting scheduled for January 18th created an opportunity that Richard Blackstone had been preparing for since his promotion to director 8 months earlier. From his perspective, the private equity firm's interest in the Meridian engagement represented validation of his strategic leadership and relationship management capabilities rather than a threat to his carefully constructed professional narrative. Richard had spent the weekend prior to the meeting developing a comprehensive presentation that would position him as the strategic architect of Sterling and Associates' most successful client relationship while addressing what he characterized as misunderstandings about team role definitions and project management structures. His approach reflected the sophisticated political skills that had enabled his rapid advancement within the firm's hierarchy despite his limited consulting experience. The presentation materials Richard prepared for senior management demonstrated his understanding of corporate communication strategies and his ability to frame complex situations in ways that supported his professional objectives. He had structured his argument around 3 primary themes that would resonate with executive leadership while deflecting attention from the specific work product development and client relationship management issues that could undermine his position. The first theme focused on organizational efficiency and the importance of clear reporting structures in complex consulting engagements. Richard positioned himself as having successfully managed the Meridian relationship through systematic delegation of analytical tasks while maintaining strategic oversight and client communication responsibilities. According to his narrative, the private equity firm's request for direct engagement with me represented a misunderstanding of professional hierarchy rather than a preference based on working relationship quality or expertise recognition. Richard's Analysis emphasized that sophisticated clients often developed working relationships with junior team members who provided detailed analytical support, but that successful engagement management required senior leadership to maintain strategic context and relationship continuity. He argued that allowing clients to bypass established management structures would create precedents that could undermine organizational effectiveness and professional development frameworks across all major engagements. The second theme addressed what Richard characterized as the natural evolution of consulting relationships during ownership transitions and organizational change periods. He presented extensive research about private equity acquisition processes and their typical impact on external consulting relationships, arguing that new ownership often brought preferences for different communication styles and engagement structures that did not necessarily reflect dissatisfaction with existing arrangements. According to Richard's analysis, private equity firms frequently preferred direct engagement with operational-level consultants during due diligence periods because they wanted detailed information about implementation processes rather than strategic overviews. He positioned the request for direct engagement with me as a temporary preference related to their acquisition assessment rather than a long-term relationship management preference that should influence Sterling and Associates' internal organizational decisions. Richard supported this argument with case studies from other consulting firms that had experienced similar requests during client ownership transitions, demonstrating that maintaining established relationship management structures typically produced better long-term outcomes than accommodating temporary preferences that could disrupt proven engagement frameworks. The third theme focused on professional development and the importance of maintaining clear advancement pathways within Sterling and Associates' consulting organization. Richard argued that allowing senior consultants to bypass management structures would undermine the firm's ability to develop future leadership while creating confusion about professional responsibility and accountability frameworks. According to his presentation, my request for direct client engagement represented a natural desire for increased responsibility and recognition that should be addressed through formal promotion processes rather than ad hoc relationship management adjustments. He positioned himself as supportive of my professional development while emphasizing that sustainable career advancement required working within established organizational frameworks rather than circumventing management structures. Richard's approach to this theme was particularly sophisticated because it acknowledged my contributions while maintaining his position as the appropriate senior leader for the engagement. He praised my analytical capabilities and client relationship skills while arguing that my development would be best served through continued collaboration within existing reporting structures rather than independent client management that could limit my exposure to senior-level strategic thinking and relationship management techniques. The presentation materials Richard developed included detailed organizational charts, project timeline documentation, and client communication records that supported his narrative about systematic delegation and strategic oversight. He had carefully selected examples that demonstrated his involvement in key decision points while minimizing documentation of my independent strategic development and direct client relationship management. Most critically, Richard had prepared explanations for the Christmas engagement that positioned his absence during the analytical development period as appropriate strategic leadership rather than failure to contribute to urgent client needs. According to his narrative, effective project management required maintaining perspective and strategic context rather than becoming immersed in detailed analytical work that could compromise broader relationship management responsibilities. Richard argued that his decision to delegate the Christmas analysis to me demonstrated confidence in my capabilities while allowing him to maintain the strategic oversight necessary for effective board presentation and relationship management. He characterized the analytical work as important but subsidiary to the strategic context and relationship management that had enabled successful client engagement throughout the 18-month engagement period. The morning of January 18, Richard arrived at Sterling and Associates headquarters 2 hours before the scheduled meeting to conduct final preparation and ensure that all presentation materials were properly organized and accessible. He had requested time on the agenda to provide context about the Meridian engagement and to address what he characterized as communication issues that had created misunderstandings about project management structures and professional responsibilities. Senior management had agreed to Richard's request for presentation time, recognizing that the Meridian situation required comprehensive understanding of engagement management processes and client relationship development before making decisions about future organizational approaches. The meeting would include Managing Partner David Sterling, Senior Director Patricia Chen, Director of Business Development Michael Rodriguez, and the consulting team members directly involved in the Meridian engagement. Richard's presentation began with a comprehensive overview of the Meridian engagement history, emphasizing the strategic relationship development and account management activities that had characterized his leadership since assuming responsibility for the relationship 18 months earlier. He presented detailed metrics about engagement growth, client satisfaction indicators, and revenue development that demonstrated successful relationship management under his direction. The presentation included testimonials from Meridian executives about their satisfaction with Sterling and Associates consulting support, though Richard was careful to select communications that referenced the consulting team generally rather than specific individual contributors. He emphasized that successful consulting relationships required coordinated team efforts rather than individual expertise, positioning himself as the coordinator who had enabled effective collaboration and client value delivery. Richard's analysis of the private equity firm's request emphasized the temporary nature of ownership transition preferences and the importance of maintaining proven relationship management structures rather than accommodating requests that could disrupt organizational effectiveness. He presented research about private equity acquisition processes that supported his argument about the transitional nature of their communication preferences. According to Richard's analysis, the private equity firm's interest in direct engagement with me reflected their focus on operational detail during the due diligence period rather than dissatisfaction with existing relationship management approaches. He argued that accommodating this request would create precedents that could undermine Sterling and Associates' ability to manage complex engagements effectively while limiting opportunities for systematic professional development. The presentation continued with Richard's recommendations for addressing the private equity firm's preferences while maintaining organizational integrity and professional development frameworks. He proposed a modified engagement structure that would provide the private equity firm with increased access to detailed operational analysis while preserving the strategic oversight and relationship management that had characterized successful engagement development. Richard's recommended approach included regular direct communication between me and the private equity representatives for operational questions and analytical updates, while maintaining his role as strategic relationship manager and primary contact for policy decisions and long-term planning discussions. This structure would address their stated preferences while preserving the management framework that had enabled successful engagement development over 18 months. Most significantly, Richard positioned this recommendation as a professional development opportunity that would provide me with increased client exposure while maintaining the strategic context and oversight necessary for continued learning and career advancement. He argued that this approach would satisfy client preferences while supporting systematic professional development that aligned with Sterling and Associates' organizational objectives. The presentation concluded with Richard's analysis of lessons learned from the Meridian engagement and recommendations for improving client relationship management processes across the firm's major engagements. He emphasized the importance of clear communication about project management structures and professional responsibilities to prevent misunderstandings that could disrupt successful client relationships. Richard's recommendations included enhanced documentation of team member roles and responsibilities, regular client communication about engagement management approaches, and systematic professional development programs that would prepare senior consultants for increased client interaction while maintaining appropriate organizational oversight. These recommendations positioned him as thoughtful about organizational improvement while addressing the specific challenges that had emerged from the Meridian situation. Following Richard's presentation, senior management requested time to review the materials and consider the implications for Sterling and Associates' approach to major client relationship management. Managing partner David Sterling emphasized that the firm's primary objective was maintaining client satisfaction while supporting professional development and organizational effectiveness. The senior management discussion that followed Richard's presentation revealed important perspectives about consulting firm organization and client relationship management that would influence their approach to resolving the Meridian situation. Managing partner David Sterling emphasized that client preferences should be accommodated when possible, but that organizational integrity and professional development considerations required careful balance with client accommodation. Senior Director Patricia Chen raised questions about the specific nature of the private equity firm's request and the basis for their preference for direct engagement with me rather than continued relationship management through established organizational structures. Her questions suggested interest in understanding the working relationship dynamics that had influenced client preferences rather than simply accommodating requests without understanding their underlying basis. Director of Business Development Michael Rodriguez expressed concern about the potential impact of the Meridian situation on other major client relationships, emphasizing that Sterling and Associates' reputation for effective relationship management was critical for continued business development and competitive positioning. His perspective focused on the broader implications of client relationship management approaches rather than the specific organizational issues raised by the Meridian engagement. The senior management discussion also addressed the professional development implications of different approaches to resolving the client relationship management challenges. Patricia Chen emphasized that Sterling and Associates was committed to supporting consultant advancement while maintaining organizational effectiveness, suggesting that professional development considerations would be important factors in determining appropriate responses to client preferences. David Sterling concluded the senior management discussion by scheduling individual meetings with the consulting team members involved in the Meridian engagement to gather additional perspective about client relationship development and working relationship dynamics. These meetings would provide opportunity for more detailed discussion about engagement management approaches and professional development considerations before making final decisions about organizational responses. The individual meeting schedule included separate sessions with Richard and me, as well as a joint meeting to discuss collaborative approaches to addressing client preferences while maintaining organizational integrity. David Sterling emphasized that these discussions would focus on understanding working relationship dynamics and identifying approaches that could satisfy client preferences while supporting professional development and organizational effectiveness. Richard's individual meeting was scheduled for January 22, providing him with additional time to prepare supplementary materials that could support his narrative about engagement management and professional development. He viewed this meeting as an opportunity to reinforce his presentation themes while addressing any questions that had emerged from senior management review of his recommendations. My individual meeting was scheduled for January 24, providing opportunity for senior management to gather perspective about client relationship development and working relationship dynamics from my direct experience with Meridian executives and private equity representatives. This meeting would represent my first opportunity to present my perspective about engagement management and client relationship development directly to senior management. The scheduling of individual meetings suggested that senior management recognized the complexity of the situation and the importance of gathering comprehensive perspective before making decisions that could influence both client relationship management and organizational development. The structured approach indicated their commitment to thorough analysis rather than immediate accommodation of client requests without understanding underlying dynamics. Richard spent the time between January 18 and his individual meeting developing supplementary materials that could reinforce his narrative about strategic leadership and relationship management effectiveness. He prepared additional case studies about consulting firm organization and client relationship management that supported his arguments about maintaining established structures while accommodating client communication preferences. The supplementary materials included detailed analysis of professional development frameworks and career advancement pathways that positioned his management approach as supporting systematic consultant development rather than limiting opportunities for increased responsibility and client interaction. Richard's preparation demonstrated his understanding that senior management would evaluate organizational implications beyond the immediate client relationship management challenges. Most critically, Richard prepared responses to potential questions about specific work product development and client interaction details that could reveal discrepancies between his narrative and the actual working relationship dynamics that had characterized the Meridian engagement. His preparation reflected awareness that senior management might investigate the details of engagement management rather than accepting his strategic overview without verification. The period between the senior management presentation and the individual meetings represented a critical phase for Richard's professional positioning within Sterling and Associates. His success in maintaining his narrative about strategic leadership and relationship management effectiveness would determine whether the Meridian situation enhanced or undermined his standing within the firm's leadership hierarchy. Richard's confidence in his presentation and preparation reflected his belief that senior management would prioritize organizational stability and established hierarchy over client accommodation that could disrupt proven management structures. His approach demonstrated sophisticated understanding of corporate decision-making processes and the factors that typically influenced executive choices about organizational management and professional development. However, Richard's preparation also revealed his incomplete understanding of the documentation and evidence that could contradict his narrative about engagement management and client relationship development. His focus on strategic positioning and organizational arguments suggested limited awareness of the detailed records that could demonstrate actual working relationship dynamics and work product development processes. The next phase of the situation would test whether Richard's political skills and strategic presentation capabilities could overcome the factual evidence about client relationship development and work product contributions that contradicted his carefully constructed narrative. about leadership and strategic management effectiveness. The irony was that Richard's sophisticated approach to managing the organizational implications of the Meridian situation had been developed without full awareness of the evidence that could undermine his credibility with senior management. His preparation for the individual meetings would soon encounter the reality of documented performance and verified client relationship dynamics that contradicted his strategic narrative. The first indication that Richard Blackstone's carefully constructed narrative might face serious challenges came through an unexpected source on January 20th. 2 days before his scheduled individual meeting with senior management. Patricia Williams, Chief Operating Officer at Meridian Industries, contacted Sterling and Associates directly to express concerns about communication gaps that had emerged during their ownership transition discussions with the private equity firm. Patricia's call was directed to managing partner David Sterling rather than through the established account management channels that Richard had maintained since assuming responsibility for the Meridian relationship. Her decision to bypass normal communication protocols suggested a level of dissatisfaction or urgency that exceeded routine client relationship management issues, creating immediate concern within Sterling and Associates executive leadership about potential problems with their most valuable client engagement. David Sterling's assistant scheduled an immediate conference call between Patricia Williams and the senior management team to address her concerns before they could impact the ownership transition process or Sterling and Associates' relationship with the incoming private equity ownership. The urgency of this communication indicated that client relationship issues had escalated beyond the internal organizational questions that Richard's presentation had been designed to address. Patricia Williams began the conference call by expressing appreciation for Sterling and Associates' consulting support during Meridian's strategic planning and competitive response initiatives over the previous 18 months. Her tone was professional and diplomatic, but her comments revealed specific concerns about communication effectiveness and strategic continuity that would require immediate attention from Sterling and Associates' leadership team. David, I want to ensure that our transition to new ownership maintains the consulting relationship quality that has been so valuable for our strategic planning processes, Patricia began. However, I am concerned about some communication gaps that have emerged during our discussions with the private equity representatives about continued consulting support and engagement management approaches. David Sterling responded with appropriate concern about client satisfaction and requested specific information about the nature of the communication challenges that had developed during the ownership transition planning. His questions reflected understanding that client relationship management during ownership changes required careful attention to stakeholder preferences and communication effectiveness. Patricia's response revealed information that contradicted several key elements of Richard's narrative about client relationship management and strategic oversight effectiveness. According to Patricia, the private equity firm's representatives had conducted detailed interviews with Meridian executives about their consulting relationships and had specifically asked about individual consultant contributions and working relationship preferences. During these interviews, we discussed our consulting engagement in detail, including the specific contributions that different team members had made to our strategic planning and operational improvement initiatives, Patricia explained. The private equity representatives were particularly interested in understanding which consultants had developed the strategic analyses that we found most valuable and which working relationships had been most effective for our operational needs. Her explanation continued with information that directly contradicted Richard's characterization of client relationship dynamics and strategic oversight responsibilities. According to Patricia, Meridian executives had consistently identified my contributions as the primary source of strategic insight and analytical value throughout the 18-month engagement period. When we discussed the competitive response analysis that was developed during the Christmas period, we specifically mentioned Jessica Martinez's exceptional work in developing strategic recommendations under very tight deadlines, Patricia said. Her analysis provided exactly the kind of practical, implementable strategic guidance that our board needed for making critical decisions about our competitive positioning. The reference to my Christmas work and its impact on Meridian's strategic decision-making provided direct contradiction to Richard's narrative about strategic oversight and presentation management. Patricia's comments suggested that Meridian executives understood exactly who had developed the analytical work that had influenced their board decisions, despite Richard's presentation of himself as the strategic architect of their recommendations. More significantly, Patricia revealed that Meridian executives had specifically requested continued direct engagement with me during the ownership transition, not because of temporary due diligence preferences but because of their recognition of my expertise and strategic contribution to their organizational development. This information fundamentally undermined Richard's argument about misunderstood hierarchy and temporary client preferences. We have specifically requested that Jessica Martinez continue as our primary consulting contact because of her deep understanding of our operational challenges and her ability to develop strategic recommendations that account for our specific organizational capabilities and market position, Patricia explained. Her expertise has been critical for our strategic planning effectiveness, and we want to ensure that relationship continuity during our ownership transition. David Sterling asked clarifying questions about the basis for Meridian's preference for direct engagement and the specific contributions that had influenced their assessment of consulting relationship effectiveness. His questions reflected appropriate diligence about understanding client relationship dynamics before making organizational decisions that could impact engagement management approaches. Patricia's responses provided detailed information about my role in developing strategic analyses, managing client communication, and supporting implementation planning that had characterized the Meridian engagement over 18 months. Her description of our working relationship revealed a level of direct strategic collaboration that exceeded the analytical support role that Richard had characterized in his presentation to senior management. Jessica has been our primary strategic consultant throughout our engagement with Sterling and Associates, Patricia said. She developed the supply chain optimization strategies that saved us over $2 million in operational costs, created the competitive positioning analysis that guided our market expansion decisions, and provided the crisis response planning that enabled our successful navigation of the Titan Manufacturing acquisition challenge. The specificity of Patricia's examples provided clear evidence of strategic leadership and client relationship management that contradicted Richard's narrative about delegation and oversight responsibilities. Her comments suggested that Meridian executives viewed me as the primary source of consulting value rather than a team member providing analytical support under strategic direction. Most critically, Patricia addressed the Christmas engagement specifically, providing information about client communication and strategic development that directly contradicted Richard's characterization of his role in managing the crisis response planning. According to Patricia, all strategic communication and analytical development during the Christmas period had occurred through direct interaction with me rather than through the management oversight that Richard had described. During the competitive crisis that required immediate strategic response, Jessica worked directly with our executive team to develop the analysis and recommendations that our board needed for decision-making, Patricia explained. Her availability and expertise during the Christmas holiday period was exceptional, and her strategic insights were exactly what we needed for addressing the competitive challenges created by Titan's acquisition. Patricia's description of the Christmas engagement revealed that Richard had not participated in client communication or strategic development during the crisis period, contradicting his narrative about strategic oversight and relationship management responsibilities. Her comments suggested that Meridian executives understood exactly who had sacrificed personal time to support their strategic needs and who had developed the analytical work that had influenced their competitive response decisions. The conference call concluded with David Sterling assuring Patricia that Sterling and Associates would address her concerns about communication effectiveness and would work with the private equity firm to establish engagement management approaches that supported continued strategic collaboration and relationship effectiveness. His response reflected understanding that client satisfaction required addressing relationship management issues rather than simply maintaining existing organizational structures. Following the conference call, David Sterling immediately scheduled a meeting with Senior Director Patricia Chen and Director of Business Development Michael Rodriguez to discuss the implications of Patricia Williams' information for Sterling and Associates' approach to resolving the Meridian engagement management challenges. The urgency of this meeting indicated that client relationship management had become a more complex issue than Richard's presentation had suggested. The senior management discussion revealed significant concern about the discrepancies between Richard's narrative about client relationship management and the actual working relationship dynamics that Patricia Williams had described. David Sterling emphasized that client satisfaction and relationship effectiveness were paramount considerations that required thorough investigation before making organizational decisions about engagement management approaches. Patricia Chen raised questions about the accuracy of Richard's characterization of his role in developing strategic analyses and managing client communication, particularly regarding the Christmas engagement that had been critical for maintaining the Meridian relationship. Her questions suggested that senior management was beginning to recognize potential credibility issues with Richard's narrative about strategic leadership and oversight responsibilities. Michael Rodriguez expressed concern about the broader implications of client relationship management misrepresentation for Sterling and Associates' reputation and business development effectiveness. His perspective focused on the potential impact of engagement management issues on other client relationships and the firm's competitive positioning in the consulting market. The senior management discussion also addressed the professional development and organizational effectiveness implications of different approaches to resolving the client relationship management challenges. Patricia Chen emphasized that Sterling and Associates needed to support consultant advancement while maintaining client satisfaction, suggesting that professional recognition and organizational integrity were both important considerations for determining appropriate responses. David Sterling concluded the senior management meeting by directing Patricia Chen to conduct additional investigation of the Meridian engagement management history before the scheduled individual meetings with Richard and me. This investigation would include review of project documentation, client communication records, and work product development to verify the actual working relationship dynamics and strategic contribution patterns. The investigation directive indicated that senior management had recognized the need for factual verification of engagement management claims rather than accepting strategic narratives without documentary evidence. This development represented a significant shift in the evaluation approach that would influence the individual meeting discussions and ultimate resolution of the client relationship management challenges. Patricia Chen's investigation began immediately with review of Meridian engagement files, project documentation, and client communication records maintained in Sterling and Associates' central information management systems. Her review was designed to verify the claims about strategic leadership, analytical contribution, and client relationship management that had been presented in Richard's materials and contradicted by Patricia Williams' information. The document review revealed significant discrepancies between Richard's characterization of his role in strategic development and the actual work product creation and client communication patterns documented in project files. Email communications, analytical reports, and client meeting notes demonstrated a pattern of direct strategic collaboration between me and Meridian executives that exceeded the analytical support role that Richard had described. Most significantly, the document review revealed that my name appeared as the primary author on strategic analyses, the primary contact for client communication, and the primary contributor to implementation planning throughout the 18-month engagement period. Richard's involvement was documented primarily through forwarding communications and attending presentation meetings rather than developing strategic content or managing analytical work. The Christmas engagement documentation was particularly revealing, showing that all analytical development, strategic planning, and client communication during the crisis period had occurred through my direct interaction with Meridian executives. Richard's email communications during the Christmas period consisted entirely of forwarding my analytical work and scheduling presentation meetings rather than contributing to strategic development or crisis response planning. Patricia Chen's investigation also included review of client feedback and satisfaction documentation that had been maintained throughout the Meridian engagement period. Client communications consistently referenced my strategic insights, analytical capabilities, and implementation support as primary sources of consulting value, while references to Richard focused on administrative coordination and presentation scheduling. The investigation findings were compiled into a confidential memorandum that would be shared with David Sterling and Michael Rodriguez before the individual meetings with Richard and me. This memorandum would provide factual foundation for evaluating engagement management claims and determining appropriate approaches to addressing client relationship management challenges. The memorandum findings indicated that Richard's narrative about strategic leadership and oversight responsibilities was contradicted by documented evidence about work product development, client communication patterns, and strategic contribution history. The evidence suggested that Richard had systematically misrepresented his role in engagement management while taking credit for strategic development and client relationship management that had been performed by other team members. Most critically, the investigation revealed that the Christmas engagement success had resulted entirely from my analytical work and client communication rather than from the strategic oversight and relationship management that Richard had claimed as his contribution. This finding directly contradicted the foundation of Richard's argument about strategic leadership during crisis situations and client relationship management effectiveness. The completion of Patricia Chen's investigation created a dramatically different context for the individual meetings that had been scheduled to address the Meridian engagement management challenges. Instead of evaluating organizational approaches to accommodating client preferences, senior management would be investigating potential misrepresentation of professional contributions and systematic credit appropriation that could have serious Implications for Richard's credibility and continued employment. The investigation findings also created opportunity for appropriate recognition of my contributions to strategic development and client relationship management that had been systematically misattributed to Richard's leadership and oversight. The documented evidence provided clear foundation for understanding the actual working relationship dynamics that had influenced client preferences and engagement effectiveness. Richard remained unaware of the investigation findings and continued his preparation for the individual meeting scheduled for January 22. His continued confidence in his narrative about strategic leadership and relationship management effectiveness reflected his lack of awareness about the documentary evidence that contradicted his claims and the client communication that had revealed the actual working relationship dynamics. The stage was now set for a confrontation between Richard's carefully constructed narrative and documented evidence about engagement management reality. The individual meetings would provide opportunity for truth to emerge through factual investigation rather than strategic presentation, creating the foundation for appropriate resolution of both client relationship management challenges and professional recognition issues. The motivational lesson emerging from this phase of the story centered on the power of truth and documentation to overcome sophisticated attempts at credit appropriation and professional misrepresentation. While Richard had invested considerable effort in developing strategic narratives and political positioning, the factual evidence about actual performance and client relationship development provided a more compelling foundation for organizational decision-making. The situation demonstrated that authentic professional excellence ultimately creates relationships and results that cannot be easily misrepresented or appropriated by others. Client recognition of genuine expertise and contribution provides validation that transcends organizational hierarchy and political maneuvering, creating opportunities for appropriate professional recognition and career advancement based on actual performance rather than strategic presentation. Richard Blackstone entered the senior management conference room on January 22 with the same polished confidence that had characterized his professional interactions throughout his tenure at Sterling and Associates. His leather portfolio contained supplementary materials designed to reinforce his narrative about strategic leadership and engagement management effectiveness, and his demeanor reflected genuine belief that the individual meeting would strengthen his position within the firm's leadership hierarchy. Managing Partner David Sterling, Senior Director Patricia Chen, and Director of Business Development Michael Rodriguez were seated around the conference table with documents and files that Richard assumed contained routine engagement management materials and organizational assessment frameworks. He interpreted their formal expressions as appropriate executive seriousness rather than the investigative focus that would characterize the next 90 minutes of professional scrutiny. David Sterling opened the meeting with comments about Sterling and Associates' commitment to maintaining client satisfaction while supporting professional development and organizational effectiveness. His tone was measured and professional, providing no indication of the documentary evidence that had been compiled through Patricia Chen's investigation or the specific discrepancies that had emerged from client communication analysis. Richard, we appreciate your comprehensive presentation about the Meridian engagement and your recommendations for addressing the client relationship management challenges that have emerged during their ownership transition, David Sterling began. Today we would like to discuss some specific aspects of engagement management and strategic development to ensure we have complete understanding of the working relationship dynamics before making organizational decisions. Richard responded with confidence, expressing appreciation for the opportunity to provide additional context about strategic leadership and relationship management effectiveness. His initial comments reiterated the themes from his presentation, while emphasizing his commitment to supporting both client satisfaction and professional development within established organizational frameworks. I welcome the opportunity to discuss the Meridian engagement in detail, Richard said. The strategic relationship management approach we have implemented has produced exceptional results for both the client and Sterling and Associates, and I believe our systematic approach to engagement management provides a strong foundation for continued success during their ownership transition. Patricia Chen consulted the investigation memorandum before posing the first specific question about engagement management documentation and strategic contribution verification. Her question was carefully structured to elicit detailed information about Richard's role in developing analytical work while providing opportunity for him to clarify any discrepancies between his claims and documented evidence. Richard, could you walk us through your specific contributions to the competitive response analysis that was developed during the Christmas period? Patricia Chen asked. We want to understand the strategic development process and the division of responsibilities between team members during that critical engagement period. Richard's response demonstrated his continued confidence in his narrative about strategic oversight and relationship management effectiveness. He described his role in terms of strategic direction, analytical coordination, and presentation management while emphasizing the importance of senior leadership during crisis situations that required immediate client response and board-level communication. The competitive response analysis represented a comprehensive strategic undertaking that required coordination of multiple analytical components and integration with our broader understanding of Meridian's market position and organizational capabilities, Richard explained. My role focused on strategic direction and ensuring that the analytical work addressed the specific decision-making needs of their board of directors. Patricia Chen followed up with more specific questions about the analytical development process and Richard's direct contributions to work product creation during the Christmas engagement period. Her questions were designed to elicit detailed information that could be verified against documented evidence while providing Richard with opportunities to acknowledge team member contributions appropriately. Can you describe the specific analytical components that you personally developed during the Christmas period? Patricia Chen asked. We want to understand the division of analytical responsibilities and the process for integrating different team member contributions into the final strategic recommendations. Richard's response revealed the first signs of uncertainty about the level of detail that senior management was seeking regarding work product development and individual contribution verification. His explanation became more general and focused on management coordination rather than specific analytical development, suggesting potential discomfort with detailed scrutiny of his claimed contributions. The analytical work involved multiple components that required integration and strategic context, Richard said. My approach focused on ensuring that all analytical elements supported the strategic objectives and communication requirements for effective board presentation rather than becoming involved in detailed analytical development that could compromise strategic perspective. David Sterling intervened with questions about client communication during the Christmas engagement period, requesting specific information about Richard's interactions with Meridian executives and his role in managing strategic dialogue during the crisis response development. His questions reflected awareness of client communication patterns that contradicted Richard's narrative about relationship management responsibilities. Richard, we have received feedback from Meridian executives about their experience during the Christmas engagement period, David Sterling said. Could you describe your specific interactions with Patricia Williams and other Meridian leadership during the analytical development and strategic planning process? Richard's response demonstrated increasing discomfort with the specific nature of senior management's questions and their apparent knowledge of client communication details that he had not anticipated would be available for their review. His explanation became more defensive and less specific about his actual involvement in client relationship management during the critical engagement period. My client communication during the Christmas period focused on strategic coordination and ensuring that our analytical development remained aligned with board decision-making requirements, Richard said. I maintained appropriate oversight while allowing Jessica to handle detailed analytical communication that required technical expertise and implementation focus. Patricia Chen presented the first documentary evidence that contradicted Richard's claims about his role in strategic development and client communication during the Christmas engagement. The evidence consisted of email communications, analytical report authorship documentation, and client meeting notes that demonstrated patterns of direct collaboration between myself and Meridian executives without Richard's involvement. Richard, we have reviewed the engagement documentation for the Christmas period, and we notice some discrepancies between your description of strategic oversight and the documented communication patterns, Patricia Chen said. The email communications and analytical reports showed Jessica Martinez as the primary contact and strategic contributor throughout the crisis response development. The presentation of documentary evidence marked the beginning of Richard's recognition that senior management had conducted detailed investigation of engagement management claims rather than accepting his strategic narrative without verification. His response reflected growing awareness that his characterization of strategic leadership and oversight responsibilities was being challenged by factual evidence. The documented communication patterns reflect the operational division of responsibilities. During the analytical development period, Richard said, my strategic oversight was maintained through regular coordination and review processes that ensured analytical work remained aligned with client requirements and strategic objectives. Michael Rodriguez presented additional evidence about client satisfaction and relationship management effectiveness that further contradicted Richard's narrative about his contributions to engagement success. The evidence included client feedback Documentation that consistently referenced my strategic insights and analytical capabilities as primary sources of consulting value. Richard, the client satisfaction documentation indicates that Meridian executives consistently identify Jessica Martinez as their primary strategic consultant and the source of analytical value that has driven engagement success, Michael Rodriguez said. How do you reconcile this client feedback with your description of strategic leadership and relationship management responsibilities? Richard's response revealed increasing defensive positioning and attempts to reframe client feedback in ways that supported his narrative about strategic oversight while acknowledging team member contributions. His explanations became more complex and less convincing as he attempted to address growing evidence that contradicted his claimed role in engagement management and strategic development. Client feedback often focuses on operational interaction and analytical detail rather than strategic oversight and relationship management that enables effective engagement coordination, Richard said. The strategic leadership framework I have maintained creates the foundation for successful team member performance and client relationship development. David Sterling presented the most damaging evidence regarding Richard's role during the Christmas engagement period, including documentation that showed Richard had been absent from all analytical development and client communication during the crisis response period. The evidence demonstrated that Richard's claimed strategic oversight had not occurred during the most critical phase of the engagement. Richard, our review of the Christmas engagement documentation shows that you were not involved in any analytical development, strategic planning, or client communication during December 23 through December 26, David Sterling said. All work product development and client interaction during this period was handled exclusively by Jessica Martinez. How do you explain your absence during this critical engagement period? The presentation of evidence about Richard's absence during the Christmas engagement created the moment of truth that would determine whether his narrative about strategic leadership could survive factual scrutiny. His response would need to address direct contradiction between his claims and documented evidence while maintaining credibility with senior management who had invested significant time in investigating his professional representations. Richard's response demonstrated recognition that his narrative about strategic oversight during the Christmas engagement could not be sustained in the face of documentary evidence about his absence during the critical analytical development period. His explanation shifted toward acknowledging team member contributions while attempting to maintain relevance through post-crisis relationship management and presentation coordination. The Christmas engagement required intensive analytical development that was best handled by team members with detailed technical expertise, Richard said. My strategic contribution focused on ensuring effective presentation and board communication after the analytical development was completed, which required maintaining strategic perspective rather than becoming involved in detailed analytical work. Patricia Chen addressed the broader pattern of engagement management and strategic contribution that had characterized Richard's leadership of the Meridian relationship over 18 months. Her questions were designed to explore whether the Christmas engagement represented an isolated incident or part of systematic misrepresentation of professional contributions and client relationship management effectiveness. Richard, our investigation indicates that the pattern of analytical development and client communication we observed during the Christmas engagement has characterized the entire Meridian relationship, Patricia Chen said. The documentation shows Jessica Martinez as the primary strategic contributor and client contact throughout the 18-month engagement period. Can you explain this pattern? Richard's response revealed full recognition that his narrative about strategic leadership and engagement management effectiveness was being systematically challenged by comprehensive documentary evidence. His explanations became increasingly focused on management coordination and organizational oversight rather than specific strategic contributions or analytical development. The engagement management approach I have implemented emphasizes systematic delegation and professional development that enables team members to develop client relationships and analytical capabilities, Richard said. This approach has produced exceptional results for both client satisfaction and consultant advancement while maintaining appropriate strategic oversight and organizational accountability. David Sterling concluded the evidence presentation by addressing the fundamental question of professional integrity and accurate representation of individual contributions within Sterling and Associates' organizational culture. His comments reflected serious concern about systematic misrepresentation of professional achievements and the implications for both client relationships and internal organizational effectiveness. Richard, the evidence we have reviewed indicates significant discrepancies between your characterization of strategic leadership and the documented patterns of analytical development, client communication, and engagement management that have characterized the Meridian relationship, David Sterling said. These discrepancies raise serious questions about professional representation and organizational integrity that require immediate attention and resolution. The meeting concluded with Richard being placed on administrative leave pending completion of senior management's investigation into engagement management practices and professional representation accuracy. David Sterling emphasized that Sterling and Associates was committed to maintaining both client satisfaction and organizational integrity, requiring thorough resolution of the credibility issues that had emerged from the Meridian situation. Richard's administrative leave represented the collapse of his carefully constructed narrative about strategic leadership and the beginning of serious professional consequences for systematic misrepresentation of contributions and achievements. His sophisticated political approach had proven inadequate when confronted with documentary evidence and client communication that contradicted his claims about engagement management effectiveness. The individual meeting demonstrated the power of factual investigation and documentary evidence to overcome strategic presentation and political maneuvering. Richard's polished confidence and comprehensive preparation had been systematically dismantled through careful review of actual performance records and verification of professional contribution claims. Most significantly, the meeting revealed that authentic professional achievement creates documentation and relationships that cannot be easily misappropriated or misrepresented by others. The evidence about my strategic contributions and client relationship management had emerged through multiple independent sources that converged on consistent conclusions about actual engagement management dynamics. The motivational lesson from Richard's confrontation with truth centered on the fundamental importance of professional integrity and authentic achievement. While sophisticated presentation and political positioning might create temporary advantages, sustainable professional success requires genuine contribution and honest representation of individual achievements and capabilities. The meeting also demonstrated that organizations ultimately benefit from factual investigation and evidence-based decision-making rather than accepting strategic narratives without verification. Sterling and Associates' commitment to investigating professional representation claims reflected organizational values that prioritized integrity and client satisfaction over political convenience and hierarchical maintenance. Richard's downfall illustrated the inevitable consequences of building professional advancement on misrepresentation rather than authentic achievement. His systematic appropriation of credit for others' work had created a foundation that could not survive factual scrutiny, demonstrating that sustainable career development requires genuine contribution rather than strategic positioning and credit manipulation. The stage was now set for my individual meeting with senior management, where the opportunity would finally arise to present accurate information about engagement management and strategic contribution without the filtering and misrepresentation that had characterized Richard's leadership of the Meridian relationship. The truth had begun to emerge, creating the foundation for appropriate professional recognition and organizational resolution of the client relationship management challenges. My individual meeting with senior management was scheduled for January 24th at 10 a.m., providing me with the first opportunity in 18 months to present my perspective about the Meridian engagement and my professional contributions without Richard Blackstone's filtering or misrepresentation. The 2 days following Richard's administrative leave had created a fundamentally different context for this discussion, transforming what might have been a defensive explanation into an opportunity for comprehensive documentation of professional achievement and strategic contribution. I arrived at Sterling and Associates headquarters 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting, carrying 3 organized binders containing detailed documentation that I had been maintaining throughout my tenure at the firm. The documentation represented more than simply defensive preparation. It reflected a systematic approach to professional accountability and performance verification that had become essential for protecting my contributions in an environment where credit appropriation had become increasingly problematic. The first binder contained comprehensive project documentation for the Meridian engagement, including analytical reports, strategic recommendations, implementation frameworks, and client communication records that demonstrated my role in developing the consulting relationship and delivering strategic value. Each document was organized chronologically with clear attribution of authorship and client interaction, providing verifiable evidence of my contributions to engagement success and relationship development. The second binder included documentation of my broader professional achievements at Sterling and Associates, encompassing 43 major client engagements that I had managed or significantly contributed to over 7 years. This documentation demonstrated patterns of strategic thinking, analytical capability, and client relationship management that extended far beyond the Meridian situation and established my overall professional competence and contribution to the firm's success. The third binder contained correspondence, performance evaluations, client testimonials, and professional development records that provided additional context about my expertise and professional standing within the consulting industry. This material included external recognition, industry awards, and continuing education achievements that supported my credibility and demonstrated commitment to professional excellence beyond immediate organizational responsibilities. Managing Partner David Sterling, Senior Director Patricia Chen, and Director of Business Development Michael Rodriguez were assembled in the conference room with the investigation materials that had been compiled through their review of engagement documentation and client communication analysis. Their expressions reflected serious professional focus rather than the routine administrative attention that typically characterized individual performance discussions. David Sterling opened the meeting by acknowledging the complex circumstances that had emerged from the Meridian ownership transition and expressing appreciation for my cooperation during the investigation process. His tone conveyed understanding that the situation involved significant professional implications that required careful consideration and appropriate resolution based on factual evidence rather than organizational convenience. Jessica, we appreciate your patience during our investigation of the Meridian engagement management issues, David Sterling began. The documentation we have reviewed raises important questions about professional contribution and client relationship management that we need to address comprehensively. We would like to understand your perspective about engagement development and the working relationships that have characterized your involvement with Meridian Industries. I responded with appreciation for the opportunity to present accurate information about my professional contributions and expressed confidence that thorough investigation would reveal the actual dynamics of client relationship management and strategic development that had driven engagement success. My tone reflected professional composure and readiness to provide detailed information about my work and achievements. I welcome the opportunity to discuss my role in the Meridian engagement and my broader contributions to Sterling and Associates. I said, I have maintained comprehensive documentation of my professional activities and client relationships that provides clear evidence of my strategic contributions and analytical development throughout my tenure at the firm. Patricia Chen requested specific information about my role in developing the competitive response analysis during the Christmas engagement period, asking for detailed explanation of the analytical process, strategic development methodology, and client communication that had characterized the crisis response planning. Her questions reflected understanding that this engagement represented a critical test of professional capability and client relationship effectiveness. Jessica, could you walk us through your specific contributions to the competitive response analysis that was developed during the Christmas period? Patricia Chen asked. We want to understand the analytical development process and the client interaction that enabled successful strategic planning under very compressed timelines. I opened the first documentation binder and presented the comprehensive materials that demonstrated my role in developing the Christmas analysis from initial client contact through final board presentation. The documentation included timestamped email communications, analytical report drafts showing development progression, and detailed records of client consultation that had informed strategic development and recommendation formulation. The competitive response analysis began on December 23 when Meridian's executive team contacted me directly to request immediate strategic guidance about Titan Manufacturing's acquisition announcement, I explained. I spent December 23 through December 25 conducting comprehensive competitive analysis, developing strategic response options, and creating implementation frameworks that addressed both defensive positioning and offensive competitive strategies. The documentation I presented included detailed analytical methodologies, data sources, and strategic reasoning that had informed recommendation development during the Christmas period. Each component of the analysis was supported by research documentation, client consultation records, and iterative development materials that demonstrated the comprehensive nature of the strategic work and the client relationship management that had enabled successful engagement completion. The analytical process required integrating multiple data sources including financial analysis of Titan's acquisition target, market impact assessment, competitive positioning evaluation, and strategic response option development, I continued. Each component required specialized analytical techniques and deep understanding of Meridian's organizational capabilities and market position that I had developed through 18 months of direct engagement with their executive team. Michael Rodriguez asked for information about my broader client relationship management responsibilities and the working relationships that had characterized my involvement in Meridian's strategic planning beyond the Christmas crisis response. His questions reflected interest in understanding whether the Christmas engagement represented typical interaction patterns or exceptional circumstances that required special analytical capability. Jessica, Could you describe the working relationship you have developed with Meridian executives over the 18-month engagement period? Michael Rodriguez asked. We want to understand the client interaction patterns and the basis for their confidence in your strategic consulting capabilities. I presented documentation from the second binder that demonstrated systematic client relationship development through consistent delivery of strategic value and analytical insight that had addressed Meridian's most complex operational and competitive challenges. The documentation included client feedback, project success metrics, and strategic impact measurements that quantified the business value of my consulting contributions. My relationship with Meridian Industries has been built through consistent delivery of strategic analyses that address their specific operational challenges and competitive positioning requirements, I explained. Over 18 months, I have developed strategic recommendations that have generated documented cost savings exceeding $4 million and competitive advantages that have strengthened their market position in multiple business segments. The client relationship documentation included detailed records of strategic planning sessions, implementation support activities, and ongoing consultation that had characterized my direct engagement with Meridian executives. Each interaction was documented with specific outcomes and business impact measurements that demonstrated tangible value creation through strategic consulting and analytical expertise. The working relationship has involved direct collaboration with Patricia Williams and other executive team members on strategic planning, operational optimization, and competitive response development, I continued. This collaboration has required deep understanding of their organizational culture, operational capabilities, and market dynamics that enables development of practical, implementable strategic recommendations rather than theoretical consulting advice. David Sterling requested information about my documentation practices and the systematic approach I had developed for maintaining records of professional contributions and client relationship management. His questions reflected recognition that my documentation had been critical for revealing the actual engagement management dynamics and understanding the credibility issues that had emerged from Richard's misrepresentation. Jessica, your documentation of professional activities appears to be exceptionally comprehensive and systematic, David Sterling observed. Could you explain the approach you have developed for maintaining these records and the reasoning behind your documentation practices? I explained that my documentation practices had been developed as a professional accountability framework that ensured accurate representation of contributions and protected against misattribution of achievements. In complex consulting environments where multiple team members contributed to client success, the documentation served both performance verification and professional development purposes by providing clear evidence of skill development and achievement progression. I began maintaining comprehensive documentation 3 years ago when I recognized that complex consulting engagements often involved contribution attribution challenges that could affect professional recognition and career development, I explained. The documentation provides factual foundation for performance evaluation and ensures that client relationship development and strategic contributions are accurately represented in professional assessment processes. The documentation practices I described included systematic recording of client interactions, analytical work product development, strategic insight generation, and implementation support activities that demonstrated my role in creating consulting value and building client relationships. Each component was organized to provide verifiable evidence of professional contribution while supporting continued learning and capability development. The systematic approach ensures that professional achievements are documented with appropriate detail and context for accurate evaluation and recognition, I continued. This documentation has proven valuable for performance assessment, professional development planning, and client relationship management verification when questions arise about contribution attribution and engagement management effectiveness. Patricia Chen asked about my professional development activities and the expertise development that had enabled my success in managing complex consulting engagements and building strong client relationships. Her questions reflected interest in understanding the foundation for my consulting capabilities and the strategic thinking that had distinguished my professional contributions. Jessica, your consulting achievements suggest sophisticated analytical capabilities and strategic thinking that have enabled exceptional client relationship development, Patricia Chen said. Could you describe the professional development and expertise building that has supported your consulting effectiveness? I presented documentation from the third binder that demonstrated systematic professional development through advanced education, industry certification, specialized training, and continuous learning activities that had enhanced my consulting capabilities and kept my expertise current with evolving industry practices and analytical methodologies. My professional development has focused on building deep expertise in operational strategy, competitive analysis, and organizational effectiveness that enables comprehensive consulting support for complex business challenges, I explained. This development includes advanced education in strategic management, certification in analytical methodologies, and continuous learning through industry engagement and professional collaboration. The professional development documentation included advanced degree completion, professional certification achievements, industry conference participation, and continuing education activities that demonstrated commitment to excellence and expertise. Enhancement beyond immediate job requirements. Each component contributed to analytical capability and strategic thinking that distinguished my consulting effectiveness. The expertise development has been guided by recognition that effective consulting requires combining analytical rigor with practical business understanding and client relationship management capabilities, I continued. This combination enables development of strategic recommendations that are both theoretically sound and practically implementable within specific organizational contexts and market conditions. Michael Rodriguez addressed the broader implications of my professional achievements for Sterling and Associates consulting effectiveness and competitive positioning in the management consulting market. His questions reflected recognition that my capabilities represented valuable organizational assets that should be appropriately recognized and leveraged for continued business development and client satisfaction. Jessica, your professional achievements and client relationship management capabilities appear to represent significant consulting assets for Sterling and Associates, Michael Rodriguez said. How do you envision leveraging your expertise and client relationships for continued organizational success and professional development? I expressed commitment to continued excellence in consulting delivery while seeking appropriate recognition and professional advancement that reflected my contributions to organizational success and client satisfaction. My response emphasized alignment between individual professional development and organizational effectiveness while ensuring that expertise and achievements were appropriately valued and supported. I am committed to continued excellence in consulting delivery and client relationship management that supports both organizational success and professional development, I said. My objective is leveraging my expertise and client relationships for continued value creation while ensuring appropriate recognition and advancement opportunities that reflect demonstrated contributions and capabilities. The discussion continued with detailed review of specific consulting achievements, client relationship development patterns, and strategic contribution examples that demonstrated my role in driving organizational success and competitive advantage. Each component of the discussion was supported by documentary evidence that provided factual foundation for professional assessment and recognition consideration. David Sterling concluded the meeting by expressing appreciation for my comprehensive documentation and professional approach to the complex situation that had emerged from the Meridian engagement management issues. His comments reflected recognition that my contributions had been systematically underrepresented and that appropriate organizational response was required to address both client relationship management and professional recognition concerns. Jessica, your documentation and professional presentation have provided valuable clarity about the actual engagement management dynamics and strategic contribution patterns that have characterized the Meridian relationship, David Sterling said. Your evidence demonstrates exceptional consulting capabilities and client relationship management effectiveness that represent important organizational assets requiring appropriate recognition and professional development support. The meeting established foundation for comprehensive organizational response to the professional representation issues that had been revealed through the investigation process. My documentation had provided factual basis for understanding actual consulting contributions and client relationship development while demonstrating systematic professional excellence that extended far beyond the immediate Meridian engagement circumstances. Most significantly, the meeting created opportunity for appropriate professional recognition and career advancement based on documented achievements and verified consulting effectiveness rather than organizational politics and credit appropriation that had characterized previous performance assessment and advancement decision-making processes. The motivational impact of presenting comprehensive evidence about professional achievements demonstrated the fundamental importance of systematic documentation and professional accountability in complex organizational environments where attribution can become challenging or politically influenced. The evidence provided protection against misrepresentation while supporting appropriate recognition and advancement based on actual performance and client relationship effectiveness. The meeting also illustrated the power of professional preparation and systematic record-keeping for overcoming credit appropriation and advancing career development based on demonstrated excellence rather than political positioning or organizational convenience. The documentation had transformed potential defensive explanations into compelling evidence of professional capability and strategic contribution that demanded appropriate organizational recognition and response. The 48 hours following my individual meeting with senior management marked a period of intensive decision-making and organizational assessment within Sterling and Associates executive leadership. The comprehensive evidence I had presented, combined with the investigation findings that contradicted Richard Blackstone's narrative, created an urgent need for decisive action that would address client relationship management, internal organizational integrity, and professional accountability concerns simultaneously. Managing partner David Sterling convened an emergency executive committee meeting on January 26 to review the complete investigation findings and develop strategic responses to the multiple challenges that had emerged from the Meridian engagement situation. The committee included all senior partners and directors who would need to approve organizational changes, personnel decisions, and client relationship management adjustments required to resolve the complex professional and business issues effectively. The executive committee meeting began with Patricia Chen presenting a comprehensive summary of the investigation findings, including documentary evidence, client communication analysis, and professional contribution verification that had revealed the systematic nature of Richard's misrepresentation and the extent of my actual strategic contributions to Sterling and Associates consulting success. Her presentation was structured to provide factual foundation for executive decision-making while highlighting the broader organizational implications. The investigation has revealed a pattern of systematic misrepresentation that extends beyond the Meridian engagement to encompass multiple client relationships and professional achievements over an 18-month period, Patricia Chen reported. Richard Blackstone has consistently appropriated credit for strategic analyses, client relationship development, and consulting successes that were actually developed and delivered by Jessica Martinez and other team members under his supervision. The investigation summary included detailed documentation of specific instances where Richard had presented others' work as his own intellectual property, claimed credit for client relationship development that had occurred through direct professional interaction with other consultants, and misrepresented his role in strategic planning and analytical development to both internal management and external clients. The evidence demonstrates that Jessica Martinez has been the primary strategic contributor and client relationship manager for several of our most successful engagements, including relationships that generate over $3 million in annual consulting revenue, Patricia Chen continued. Her expertise and professional capabilities have been systematically underrepresented while Richard has built his advancement and reputation through appropriation of her achievements and contributions. David Sterling addressed the immediate client relationship management implications of the investigation findings, emphasizing that Meridian Industries and other major clients had developed working relationships and professional preferences based on actual consulting effectiveness rather than the organizational hierarchy that Sterling and Associates had been maintaining for engagement management purposes. Our investigation has confirmed that multiple clients specifically value Jessica's strategic insights and consulting capabilities, with several expressing preferences for continued direct engagement that bypass our established management structures, David Sterling explained. These client preferences reflect recognition of consulting excellence that we have failed to appropriately acknowledge and leverage within our organizational framework. The client relationship analysis included feedback from Meridian Industries, as well as 3 other major clients who had specifically requested continued engagement with me during recent contract renewal discussions. Each client relationship demonstrated patterns of strategic collaboration and consulting effectiveness that contradicted the subordinate analytical role that Richard had consistently characterized in his reporting to senior management. Senior Director Michael Rodriguez presented analysis of the financial and competitive implications of the situation, including potential revenue impacts, client relationship risks, and organizational reputation considerations that would influence Sterling and Associates' strategic response to the professional misconduct and consulting effectiveness issues that had been revealed through the investigation process. The financial implications are significant and extend beyond immediate client relationship management to encompass broader organizational credibility and competitive positioning concerns, Michael Rodriguez reported. Richard's misrepresentation has created potential liability exposure while Jessica's underutilization represents lost opportunities for business development and competitive differentiation in our target market segments. The financial analysis demonstrated that my strategic contributions had directly generated documented cost savings and competitive advantages for clients that exceeded $8 million over 18 months, while the consulting fees associated with my actual client relationship management responsibilities approached $2 million annually. These figures contradicted the junior analytical role that had been reflected in my compensation and advancement opportunities. The analysis also reveals that several potential client engagements were declined or unsuccessfully pursued because we failed to appropriately leverage Jessica's expertise and industry recognition for business development and proposal development activities, Michael Rodriguez continued. These missed opportunities represent additional revenue implications that compound the direct costs of systematic professional misrepresentation. The executive committee discussion addressed the immediate personnel decisions required to resolve the professional misconduct issues while protecting Sterling and Associates' client relationships and organizational reputation. The discussion focused on appropriate consequences for Richard's systematic misrepresentation and necessary organizational changes to prevent similar professional accountability problems in the future. Senior partner Elizabeth Warren raised concerns about the precedent that would be established by the executive committee's response to Richard's misconduct, emphasizing that organizational culture and professional standards required clear accountability measures that would protect against future credit appropriation and ensure appropriate recognition of individual contributions to consulting success. The systematic nature of Richard's misrepresentation creates serious concerns about our organizational oversight and professional development frameworks, Elizabeth Warren observed. Our response must address both immediate accountability requirements and systemic improvements that will prevent similar professional misconduct while ensuring appropriate recognition and advancement for genuine consulting excellence. The discussion included consideration of legal implications, client communication requirements, and industry reputation considerations that would influence the appropriate approach to addressing Richard's misconduct while protecting Sterling and Associates' competitive position and professional standing within the management consulting market. David Sterling presented preliminary recommendations for organizational response that addressed both immediate personnel decisions and longer-term structural changes required to ensure appropriate professional accountability and consulting effectiveness recognition. His recommendations reflected understanding that the situation required comprehensive organizational adjustment rather than simple personnel changes. Our response must address Richard's systematic professional misconduct through appropriate disciplinary action while simultaneously implementing organizational changes that ensure Jessica receives appropriate recognition, advancement, and compensation that reflects her demonstrated consulting capabilities and client relationship management effectiveness, David Sterling explained. The preliminary recommendations included immediate termination of Richard's employment due to professional misconduct and violation of organizational integrity standards, promotion of me to senior director level with responsibility for strategic client relationship management, and implementation of enhanced documentation and oversight procedures to prevent future credit appropriation and ensure accurate professional contribution assessment. The recommendations also include comprehensive client communication that acknowledges organizational changes while ensuring continuity of consulting effectiveness and relationship management quality, David Sterling continued. This communication will position the changes as organizational improvements that enhance our consulting capabilities rather than corrections of previous mismanagement. The executive committee discussion included detailed consideration of my qualifications for senior leadership responsibilities and the organizational structure modifications that would be required to support effective transition to expanded client relationship management and strategic consulting responsibilities. The discussion reflected recognition that my promotion represented both appropriate recognition and strategic organizational improvement. Senior partner Margaret Thompson raised questions about my readiness for senior leadership responsibilities and the support systems that would be required to ensure successful transition to expanded client relationship management and business development responsibilities beyond my current analytical and strategic consulting expertise. Jessica's consulting capabilities and client relationship management effectiveness are clearly established through the investigation findings, Margaret Thompson observed. However, senior leadership responsibilities encompass business development, team management, and organizational strategy considerations that require different expertise and experience than individual consulting excellence. The discussion of my qualifications included review of my professional development activities, leadership experience through project management responsibilities, and demonstrated capability for strategic thinking that extended beyond individual client engagement to encompass broader organizational and industry considerations that would be relevant for senior leadership effectiveness. Patricia Chen presented analysis of my professional development and leadership capabilities that addressed concerns about readiness for senior responsibilities while highlighting the strategic thinking and organizational effectiveness that had characterized my consulting success and client relationship development over 7 years at Sterling and Associates. Jessica's professional achievements demonstrate sophisticated strategic thinking, exceptional client relationship management capabilities, and systematic approach to professional development that provides strong foundation for senior leadership. Responsibilities, Patricia Chen reported. Her consulting success reflects capabilities that extend beyond individual excellence to encompass the strategic perspective and organizational effectiveness required for senior management roles. The executive committee discussion concluded with approval of comprehensive organizational response that addressed immediate personnel decisions, client relationship management adjustments, and structural improvements designed to prevent future professional accountability problems while enhancing Sterling and Associates' consulting effectiveness and competitive positioning. The approved response included immediate termination of Richard Blackstone's employment for systematic professional misconduct and violation of organizational integrity standards, promotion of me to Senior Director of Strategic Client Relations, with expanded responsibilities for major client relationship management and business development, and implementation of enhanced professional accountability frameworks to ensure accurate contribution assessment and appropriate recognition. The organizational response reflects our commitment to professional integrity and consulting excellence while positioning Sterling and Associates for continued success through appropriate recognition and leveraging of authentic consulting capabilities. David Sterling announced as the executive committee meeting concluded. The implementation of executive committee decisions began immediately with preparation of personnel action documentation, client communication materials, and organizational structure modifications required to support the comprehensive changes that had been approved. The implementation process reflected understanding that effective organizational response required careful coordination to ensure successful transition and continued client satisfaction. Patricia Chen was assigned responsibility for coordinating the implementation process, including preparation of Richard's termination documentation, development of my promotion and compensation adjustment materials, and creation of client communication that would explain organizational changes while ensuring continued consulting effectiveness and relationship management quality. The client communication strategy focused on positioning the organizational changes as strategic improvements that enhanced Sterling and Associates' consulting capabilities rather than corrections of previous management problems. The communication emphasized my expanded responsibilities and the enhanced client access to senior strategic consulting that would result from the organizational restructuring. The client communication will emphasize organizational commitment to consulting excellence and strategic relationship management while highlighting the enhanced capabilities and improved access to senior expertise that clients will receive through the restructured engagement management approach, Patricia Chen explained during the implementation planning process. The preparation of my promotion documentation included comprehensive compensation adjustment that reflected both appropriate recognition of my historical contributions and market competitive positioning for senior director responsibilities. The compensation package included base salary increase of 42%, performance bonus eligibility that reflected revenue responsibility for major client relationships, and equity participation that aligned my interests with Sterling and Associates. Long-term success. The compensation adjustment reflects both historical undercompensation relative to Jessica's actual contributions and forward-looking positioning that supports continued excellence in expanded leadership responsibilities, David Sterling explained during the compensation planning process. The implementation timeline included Richard's termination on January 28, announcement of my promotion and expanded responsibilities on January 30, and client communication regarding organizational improvements beginning February 1. The timeline was designed to ensure smooth transition while minimizing disruption to client relationships and ongoing consulting engagements. The preparation process also included development of enhanced professional accountability frameworks designed to prevent future credit appropriation and ensure accurate assessment of individual contributions to consulting success. These frameworks included systematic documentation requirements, regular client feedback collection, and enhanced oversight procedures for engagement management and strategic contribution verification. The enhanced accountability frameworks will ensure that professional contributions are accurately represented and appropriately recognized while supporting continued consulting excellence and client relationship effectiveness, Patricia Chen explained during the policy development process. The motivational significance of the Executive Committee's comprehensive response demonstrated that organizational commitment to professional integrity and consulting excellence could overcome political positioning and systematic misconduct when factual evidence and client relationship effectiveness provided clear foundation for decision-making. The swift and decisive organizational response reflected recognition that authentic consulting capabilities and client relationship management effectiveness represented valuable organizational assets that required appropriate recognition and support rather than political accommodation of systematic professional misrepresentation. Most importantly, the Executive Committee's decision established precedent for professional accountability and merit-based advancement that would influence Sterling and Associates' organizational culture and professional development approaches for future consulting staff and client relationship management responsibilities. The comprehensive nature of the organizational response created foundation for continued excellence in consulting delivery while ensuring that professional achievements would be accurately represented and appropriately rewarded based on demonstrated capabilities and client relationship effectiveness rather than political positioning or credit appropriation strategies. The morning of January 28 brought the implementation of Sterling and Associates' comprehensive organizational response to the professional misconduct and client relationship management issues that had been revealed through the investigation process. The swift execution of Executive Committee decisions reflected the firm's recognition that immediate action was required to address both accountability concerns and client relationship protection while establishing new standards for professional integrity and consulting excellence. Richard Blackstone's termination meeting was conducted at 9 a.m. in the Human Resources Conference Room, with Director of Human Resources Sarah Mitchell and Senior Director Patricia Chen present to ensure appropriate documentation and professional handling of the disciplinary action. The meeting was structured to provide clear communication about the basis for termination while maintaining organizational confidentiality about investigation findings and client relationship considerations. Sarah Mitchell opened the meeting by reviewing Sterling and Associates' professional conduct standards and the investigation findings that had established systematic violation of organizational integrity requirements through misrepresentation of professional contributions and inappropriate appropriation of colleague achievements. Her presentation was factual and comprehensive, providing Richard with complete understanding of the basis for disciplinary action. Richard, our investigation has revealed systematic misrepresentation of professional contributions and inappropriate appropriation of colleague achievements that violate Sterling and Associates' professional conduct standards and organizational integrity requirements, Sarah Mitchell explained. These violations constitute grounds for immediate termination due to professional misconduct and breach of employment agreement obligations. The termination documentation included detailed specification of professional misconduct instances, including the systematic appropriation of my strategic analyses and client relationship management achievements, misrepresentation of his role in the Christmas engagement and other critical client situations, and violation of professional accountability standards through false representation of individual contributions to consulting success. Patricia Chen presented additional information about the client relationship management implications of Richard's misconduct, emphasizing that his misrepresentation had created potential liability exposure and damaged Sterling and Associates' reputation for professional integrity and consulting excellence within their target market segments. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.